Alright, so you can see it's turning down a coupler for the transmission. So we can mount the transmission on the rear end. So this is the drive shaft coupler for the original transmission. We're turning down the lip so it'll fit into the rear end. It's got the same bolt pattern, both Chryslers. Alright, so in today's video we'll be putting in another crossmember on this frame jig. And what that's going to do is that's going to hold the transmission, the front of the transmission, square it all up, get it where I want to. That way there we can start figuring out where the motor is going to be, where the seating position is going to be, all the linkage for the shifter, all the controls, everything, so we can figure out the wheelbase and we can start building this thing. So what we're going to do first is I get these two pieces of angle iron. Now this is not going to hold much. I don't need to make a real big beefy brace because all it's going to be holding is the front of the transmission. The back's going to be held by that one. So all together it's going to be holding up just fine. So we're going to make it kind of a smaller one than we've been using. So I got this, I think it's a 1x1. It's out of my scrap pile. I'm using that as a cross piece. So I got these two angles. We're going to square those up, clamp them down, and then we're going to put that on there and then build up from there. Alright, so step one of this process is I'm just going to square these two angles onto the frame jig. So that they're square with each other. Clamp them down so they stay put. Let's check them again. Looking pretty good. Alright, next I'm going to clean this cross piece up. Now I'll put this on there, square that up, measure it, put it where I want it, and I'll throw some beads on that, and it should be good to go. Alright, so I got this piece all cleaned up. Decided I'm going to try to put it in the middle. I'm not going to be too worried about where exactly it is, but in the middle is fine. Eyeball it. Take this square again. Get it roughly where I want it to be. Get the square. Cut this to the right length so it's flush on both sides. Now it's good for me to throw tack on there. Tacks in there. Want a bead on there. Good enough to remove the clamps after it cools. Get in a comfortable position. Maybe. that cool for a minute. Take these clamps off, check it again, and if it didn't pretzel too much, I'll throw a bead on the other side. Alright. Alright, so the part is cool a little bit. Feels pretty good. Very little side to side, very little. It doesn't want to twist all that much. It looks like it's pretty good and solid. Whatever it is, fits both directions. Yeah. What I do now is just run my beads on this side. Should be pretty good. Let that cool. I'm gonna clean the top up, start measuring up for my transmission I want to run. Go from there. Alright, so now I got my cross piece in there, cooled, ready to go. In order to figure out where it's going to be and how tall I need to make those risers, I got to mount the transmission in here and do some measuring. So, this will be another one of those interesting little time lapse. Me trying to put this transmission in there. Nope. Here we go. Alright, so this is the problem I was having. See the collar right here. You put the bolt in there and it fits, but couldn't turn it. So pretty much what that means is I put a nut on the other side, I'm not going to be able to turn it. So I had to come up with something different. That's where I got these Allen head bolts. What they allow me to do is get them in there, I can put the nut on the other side, and the nut won't turn, that'll be up against the side, but I'm able to turn this to tighten it down. So these aren't the bolts I'm going to be using permanently, but they'll work for the setup. Probably end up getting grade 8s in the future. Alright, so we get the transmission is mounted. Right now it's just bolted in there and we got it braced up. Jack stand and a piece of wood. So what I do is I got this piece of square tubing, which can go right here. Piece of angle iron, which I'm going to put underneath the the output shaft, or I should say input shaft, so that we can hold the front end up. And I want to leave the 4 main bolts open because that's where I'm going to put my tabs to the frame to hold it in place. So I don't want my support being in the way of me making the brackets. So that's why we're going to put it out here. It's just going to support the front end of it up. That's all it's going to really do. Just hold the weight. All right, so let's get to that. So I put this in there. As I cut it a little long, which is what I wanted. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to notch this out so that the angle will fit in there better. And I'll get a little more surface area. And doing that, I will make a better weld. Alright, so I got it notched out. Cleaned it up just a little bit. And it's not structural, it's just a little brace for now, so not a big deal. Put this in there, make sure it fits. And that will fit nicely. So next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to square it up with this, make sure it's all straight and true. And then I'll put it underneath this, and then I'm able to lower the front end of this transmission down onto it. Right now it's a little high. And should turn out nicely. So let's get to it. Alright, I got my brace here on my table. I'm using these two to keep this straight here, and the table is going to keep it all nice and square. I'm going to use this as a square to keep it square here. I'm going to find the middle. I'm just going to make this I need to just loosen this up. Try that. And a little more back. Alright, so it's in the middle. This here is all squared up. Looking good. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to run a weld there. I'm going to get this out of the way. I don't need this to get ruined. Alright, now because this is a brace, I want to completely weld it in, because after this project's over I can still break this off and use it in another project. So I got this welded on this side. What I'm going to do is I'll take it apart and I'll throw a quick tack on the other side, which will hold it in place. Whether I grind this side off, I can pry it back and forth until it snaps. So, alright, that's done. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is put this guy on top. Make sure it's reading at 0. And I will put a tack on it. Alright, so now I'm back over here to my frame jig. I'm going to put this in place. There we go. So, this should now be holding that. Alright, now there's an issue I wasn't expecting to find. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to check to make sure the transmission is mounted on there straight. And which I'm pretty sure it is. I can start measuring this, making sure this is straight, because you know, you get a little bit off on the rear end and you start coming way out here, you'll start to see a lot more of the air coming through. So that's probably why this is still hot. But probably why that's not lining up. So either I measured and put this in the wrong spot, or this whole thing is out of alignment. So good to catch that now before we get too far. So that's what we do now. I'm going to measure it up. I'm getting 16, almost right in the money, right there. 16. This side I'm getting. Oh yeah, it's off quite a bit. I'm getting 16 and a half, so that would explain the difference here. So something went wrong while I was measuring up the rear end. So this has to move over quite a bit. Let's find out what's wrong. Alright, so I haven't really done anything yet. Just looking at it. About to phone a friend about this. I'm looking at it. I know that rear end was straight. I just measured it again and it is straight. But why is the front end off? By what looks like, you know, close to, I don't know, ½ inch or so. Could the fall in the middle. And I started looking at it and like, oh. You know, this is my first time doing this type of stuff, so of course little things will slip my mind. But I'm sure a lot of people are already talking about it. It's, the rear end is offset for the drive shaft. Because of the differential in the back, I didn't even take that into consideration. The input for the rear end is off to one side. So of course that's why when I measured the front, it's not going to line up. And I made my cross piece centered with this jig. And of course my transmission is not going to be straight because it is offset for the ring gear. So I'm going to keep plugging on. I'm going to cut that bracket off, move it over the ½ inch, and I'm going to start measuring up again. And then, yeah, I said that I completely overlooked that. So you're learning with me. Alright, so for this attempt, I'm not going to use my table. I'm just going to kind of eyeball it, bring it over here. Sure it's square up and down the best I can. It's in position there. I'm just going to put it on there. Ground strap would help. this is just to hold the transmission up. I'm not going to do any measurements off these brackets. So if it's not perfect, I'm not too worried about it so long as it does the job of holding this part up. This is what I'm going for. And it does that, good to go. Straight. Alright, now that's on there. Let that cool before I actually put the weight on it. It looks like it's going to be just fine. Out there that's holding it up. Drop that down into place. And again, that's just to hold it in place so I know where it's going to land in the frame. Obviously this is not, no, it's still turned, so I'm not worried about side to side at the moment, but that there is that, that's about right. Yep, looking good. So there's a transmission installed. And what I'll do next week is I'll find out where I want my wheelbase to be. I'll put the front end on, I'll square it all up. As far as the seating position goes, I'm pretty much going to be sitting right over the rear axle. I'll probably be up a little higher, but it's a garden tractor, it's not a race car. I'll be up a little higher. That'll give me room to put my weights for pulling. It's getting there.